Hello, welcome back to the channel. It's me, Emmy the Cat Lady, and we're back here on the island in Far Harbour to talk about the food chain. Oh, fog gill, where's, oh, up there. Fog gills. So we're going to take a little wander into the wilderness here just to have a little explore around. So today we're picking up the Ecology series and talking about the food chain in Far Harbour. So there's an interesting thing that's happened here because of the kind of unique wildlife and stuff, that a lot of the kind of smaller creatures that you see back in the Commonwealth, like a lot of the kind of mutated insects and things, aren't really here. And the reason for that is because a lot of bigger, nastier things have mutated and evolved here that kind of take them down and fill the same ecological niche, which obviously means that they don't survive quite as well as some of the kind of nastier things, like, oh, there's shipbreaker again. And that's one of the things about this place, and one of the reasons that surviving on the island is so difficult for the people as well, is because there is these nasty giant creatures, and there's more of them than we see anywhere else, so it does make the whole prospect quite dangerous. And it does mean that our kind of food web and our food chain is kind of top heavy, that we have quite a lot of kind of apex predators. I'm stuck on scenery here. There we go. You know, we've got a lot more kind of apex predators and a lot less of the kind of smaller creatures, but there are some, so it does make things quite interesting and also potentially quite challenging, because you are forever battling against the big nasty things, as well as trying to eke out an existence of your own and find enough food to keep yourself alive. So it does become a bit of a battleground, really, in a way that we don't really see quite to the same degree elsewhere in the Wasteland. So very, very interesting kind of mix of creatures. So some of the ones that we know and love, like the death claws, the super mutants, are here. And then we've got a bunch of new ones like the gulpers, the anglers, and the fog crawlers. And the fog crawlers are definitely cut from the same cloth as the mirelurk queens, and of course, being on an island in the ocean and things, the mirelurks are also here in massive numbers, including the mirelurk queens. So there's really a lot to watch out for, but if you get good at taking them down, then there's good eating in a lot of these creatures as well. And that's always been the challenge for humanity, since we first existed, really, is that we've had to find ways of finding food, and as well as fending off things that are bigger. Oh, it's there. I was like, wait, we got an invisible mute fruit. That we had to find a way to survive by finding food, but also avoiding becoming food for other things. That's always been the way of the world and the way of nature. So, hunting and gathering was how things started, with finding wild plants that were edible, versus, and taking down and finding ways to take down animals that could be eaten. And then somebody had the idea of, like, oh, well, why don't we just kind of cultivate these plants and grow them and look after them, and then we can produce more food that way. And that's how agriculture got started. But in nature, it's still always going to be the battle about trying to eat but not be eaten, and survive long enough to reproduce so that your species continues to exist. And that's forever been the kind of battle. And humanity, we like to think of ourselves as being kind of more evolved. We've developed intelligence, so to speak, that kind of thing. But at the core, there is still this need for food and this need for survival that's kind of an inherent instinct in all of us. So, it's very, very interesting to look at that, and then how the dynamic between the different species has shifted based on, changes and evolution, which obviously is somewhat artificially induced in the fallout world because of radiation and FEV and other factors that have allowed these creatures to change so drastically. Like, for example, the fog crawlers, which are based on a kind of crustacean And they've gone from being tiny to absolutely massive and extremely destructive. The hermit crabs as well. I say most hermit crab species are actually quite small in the real world, but the ones here haven't found any kind of shells big enough to use, so they're using vans to as their shells. And I'll say I'll never ever forget the first time I came across one of them, and I just thought, oh, it's just another abandoned vehicle like these ones. And then the legs came out, and I was like, oh no. I mean, I might have said words that were a bit less polite than "oh no." Yeah, this is the kind of van the hermit crabs live in. Actually, I don't think this one is. Well, this one isn't. It's got a lot of pre-war money in it and stuff, though. Actually, oh, there we go. We'll hop up here. So yeah, there's a suitcase with some raider armor in it and a bag full of money. But some of those vans actually do have a giant hermit crab hiding inside them, so be careful. But it does mean that, you know, the people here that are trying to live here, they're not just contending with the radiation and the fog and everything. They're contending with all this nasty wildlife as well. That is, because everything's trying to kill you out here near enough, including other people. So it does make things quite different to what we've seen elsewhere. So I'm going to switch screens now, and we'll look at the food chain food web chart that I've made for this. So it's definitely going to look a wee bit different to the one we had for Fallout 4, but I'll show you that one again quickly as well. So I'll just switch screens over and I'll be back with you shortly. Okay, so this one is the one that I made for Fallout 4, which I will link back to in this video in case you haven't seen that one. So the colour coding quickly. So blue is the colour for plants essentially, green for herbivores, yellow for primary predators, orange for secondary predators, and then red for tertiary predators and apex predators at the very, very top. So obviously we have our consumers at each level, and then that kind of builds up to the apex predators, which by definition are predators that don't have predators of their own. There's nothing that specifically hunts or tries to eat them. Obviously, sometimes you'll have opportunistic scavengers and things that if they find something dead, and if you do manage to take down these animals in the game, then you can make food from them, except the super mutants. So, but the idea is that they're kind of at the top of the food chain, and there's not really anything that hunts them. And generally speaking, the way that works up the chain is that the higher level of predator is, the bigger and more dangerous it is the kind of rule of thumb. We also have our kind of scavengers, so things like your bloatflies, your stingwings, blood bugs, radroaches, which are everywhere, as well as the fungi that break down dead things as well. That's kind of synths in the corner there because they're a bit of a question mark. So this is the original kind of Fallout 4 food web, but this is the Far Harbour one. So some things are missing, but we also have a couple more things at this very top layer. So we're going to start down at the bottom. I'm just going to zoom in a bit here. So we do have our plants and fungi. So we've got grass there and razor grain, which is also a kind of grass technically, but the seeds can be used for food for other species. And then the couple of the new plant things that were added. So you've got the lureweed, which is what the anglers pretend to be when they're hiding under the water. And you've got your blight mushrooms, which you saw me picking when we were in the game. So they've been added to the plant life, and you do find the mute fruit and potatoes and all the other ones that you know from the Commonwealth as well. So there's quite a range of plants, and certainly a plant-based diet is probably more feasible than it is in other places in the Wasteland. And then we move up here, we've got our herbivores. So we've got the radstags, which we have seen in the Commonwealth. There are newer varieties that are based on a different kind of deer that has like tusks and things. But we've also got rad rabbits, which are actually fairly minimally changed. They're probably a bit bigger than normal wild rabbits. They're missing a lot of hair, but otherwise they look and behave like rabbits do. They are a very common prey species in the world. There's an awful lot of animals that will eat rabbits and will hunt for rabbits across the world. And they do. They're still farmed for food in some places as well. I have eaten rabbit before, and it was pretty good. But a lot of wild animals do hunt rabbits because rabbits do exist in a lot of continents across the world. They exist in a lot of places. They also reproduce extremely rapidly, which makes them, that's kind of their strategy for allowing the species to continue, because so many things eat them, is that they reproduce and overwhelm with numbers, because at least then they know that there's going to be some that survive long enough to reproduce themselves. That's the kind of survival strategy of the rabbit. That they can produce a litter basically once a month near enough, quite easily. They can get pregnant pretty much right away after delivering a litter of kits. The cycle can go very, very quickly with rabbits, so there's a reason that there's jokes made about that, essentially. Then we've got the humble chicken, the Rad's chicken, and again, it doesn't seem to be massively changed compared to the real world chickens. We're missing a lot of feathers, except for a few tail feathers and head feathers. And there is some kind of lesions on the skin, which might be a bit questionable. You might want to make sure you eat your chicken skinless in that case. But other than that, it's a chicken. It does what chickens do. Not really too much to say about it, but it's good to see the humble chicken is making a comeback, because it's very commonly eaten. Meat and eggs are always useful as well if you want to actually cook something properly, and death claw eggs are a bit harder to come by, so interesting one there. So we do have a few more herbivores to the team, although chickens are technically omnivores. They do eat insects and sometimes each other. So they are less specifically herbivores, but they still fit into this category because it's more likely that they're going to be eaten than they're going to eat something else. And then we get up to our kind of first level predators here. So we have got the mirelurks, although there is a new variety that's a bit tougher, which is the blood rage mirelurks have been added as well, so they are a bit more dangerous. But you do also have your higher level ones, your kings and hunters and things that tend to be a bit tougher. But we've also added wolves, which we don't see in the Commonwealth. They're primary predators, generally speaking. They will hunt rabbits and chickens and rad stags and whatnot. The thing about the wolves is that they do live in packs, which means that they have a cooperative hunting technique, whereas some other predatory species are solitary and hunt for themselves. Most cats do that. Bears and things tend to do that, but wolves do live in a sort of closer knit pack, and they will hunt as a group and share the food with the whole pack. Although the whole thing about alpha wolves is actually utter nonsense. That's been debunked many times. That behaviour only really is apparent when they're kept in captivity, but in the wild there is less. There's still a bit of a hierarchy, but it's not quite as strict as people seem to think it is. But they are here, and they make things interesting as well. And then we've got our new kind of amphibian monstrosities. We've got the angler. These things are really creepy. Real anglerfish are really creepy as well. But they hide, they're ambush predators. They hide under the water, pretending to be a lureweed, and then they jump up and they grab you. And again, they're going to eat smaller things than them as well. And then we've got our gulpers, which are some kind of frog mutation kind of a thing. They have a habit of hiding in trees actually and waiting, and then they'll jump down. So again, they tend to follow the kind of ambush predator tactics that we've seen as a similar kind of thing to what we see in some spiders and crocodiles, a lot of crocodilians, that's their thing. I mean, it's one thing that crocodiles won't tend to chase you, because it takes too much energy. If you run away, they'll just kind of give up and go back. They're hide in the water and grab their prey that way. That's their technique. And the gulpers kind of employ a similar technique, same as the anglers that they've added. And then we go up to the next level. So humans are here. We're no longer apex predators. So yeah, humans, we're no longer apex predators here. There's a lot of bigger and scarier things than us. We do have the trappers who do seem to employ some cannibalism tendencies as well. So it is something that unfortunately is kind of a problem in most places in the Wasteland, that we do see a bit of cannibalism. We have the ghouls and feral ghouls. There's very few non-feral ghouls on the island. Most of the ones that we see are, I can't remember actually if there is any non-feral ghouls at all on the island. I don't remember seeing any. Unless maybe the Children of Atom, there's a couple, but there's certainly plenty of feral ghouls around. And we know that the thing that pushes ghouls to becoming feral is exposure to radiation, so it kind of makes sense that, you know, the non-feral ghouls might not live very well because the fog maybe pushes them to become feral. But I don't actually remember seeing any non-feral ghouls on the island. But the feral ghouls certainly exist and are also prone to eating things. They tend to eat anything that they can find. We do have the Yalguai, or bears, and they are also kind of on the same level. They will eat the smaller predators, they will eat the herbivores and things, and there is a higher level variety, the irradiated Yalguai that they've added. And then we have our super mutant friends. Mostly they hang around at the Vim Pop factory, but they have spread across the island, and they do turn up in other places. They will eat humans. They will eat a bunch of other stuff that they can take down. Basically, anything that they can take down, they will eat. And then we get up to the big bads, the apex predators. So we've got the hermit crabs, as I discussed. They are much, much larger than they used to be. That they're using literal vehicles as shells, because that's the defining thing about hermit crabs, is that they don't have shells of their own. So they find shells and they use them to protect them, and then they swap them out as they grow. So when they get bigger, they need a bigger shell. And what they actually do, which is fascinating behaviour, is that they actually have like a little swap meet. So a bunch of hermit crabs that need to change their shells, they'll get together and they'll swap shells around to suit each other and share them out, which is fascinating. It's really, really funny. You know, when they swap shells around until they all find one that fits them, and then they kind of go on their way after that, which is adorable. So these guys are less cute, but they are big, and again, they are using a camouflage technique. They're ambush predators. They hide inside their little van shell and they wait, and then as soon as something interesting walks past, they wake up and they attack. So quite a sneaky sort of technique, and it is something that a lot of predatory species do, is to use that kind of tactic, because chasing after prey uses energy, and if you're not guaranteed to catch something and eat, then you're wasting calories essentially. So a lot of predators will use these techniques to conserve their energy, so that they don't exhaust themselves before they actually get more food. So it's quite a common technique. We've got the super mutant behemoths, so they live at the top because they're huge and aggressive, and they will kill and eat anything they can get their hands on. Same with the death claws, we're quite familiar with them now. They're definitely one of the most dangerous things out there, and they sit at the top of the food chain anywhere that they are present. Humans get back to the apex predator status basically in places where the death claws don't exist, and those places are few and far between. So something to keep in mind. And then the other kind of newer creatures, so the Mirelurk Queen, which was something that was only really added in Fallout 4, If you've played Fallout 4 at all and you've tangled with one of these, you know how much of a threat they are. They are big, they're aggressive, they fire babies at you. And Mirelurks do tend to live in kind of colonies, so it's very rare to find a queen on her own without a bunch of other Mirelurks around, so that they can just swarm anything that gets too close, and they are obviously very, very dangerous. And then the new one, the fog crawler. So again, it's another kind of crustacean that's mutated, and they are sneaky. They do hide in the fog, and they do cause a lot of damage. They're again very aggressive, very large, very tough to take down. And the one that you get the radio signal for, Shipbreaker, obviously earned a nickname by destroying ships. So they're not nothing, and they are something to be wary of. So again, I have placed them at the top of the food chain, because it's a common theme is that generally speaking, animals that are bigger and more dangerous will live higher in the food chain than something that's smaller and less dangerous. I mean, most animals can present some kind of danger, even your herbivores. So, like deer, especially, are quite panicky, and they can charge and they can kick and they can do a lot of damage with their antlers. Especially during the rut season, which is in the autumn or fall, if you will, when they're obviously getting ready to mate, and that's when the bucks, or the males especially, get really, really aggressive, and they can do damage. And even rabbits and chickens, you might think this is think, oh, there's nothing dangerous about them, but if you've ever been bitten by a rabbit or a rodent, it's bloody painful, really, really sore. And rabbits have a lot of strength in their back legs as well, so a good kick can definitely leave you with bruises. I have also been attacked by a chicken before, so you don't discount them even when they're smaller. Again, those beaks are quite sharp and it can be quite sore when they peck you. The only time where I've had an animal that was small enough to not do me any harm was a leopard gecko that used to bite, and it was only funny because their teeth are so small they can't actually penetrate human skin. So he would just be chomping away on my finger, and I was just like, "Yeah, carry on, buddy." Completely unaffected, but it stands to reason. It's the same thing as what we see in the real world. The bigger, more aggressive animals do tend to be more successful, and because the island has so many of these, that's the reason that we really don't see our radroaches and things to the same degree. We don't. You do still find them in a couple of places, the radroaches, but there's not really any bloatflies or stingwings or anything like that. A lot of these kind of smaller insects, because they just can't get themselves established because there's too many things that are bigger and more aggressive that are eating them. So that's kind of the reason for that. But we do have some radroaches, and there's plenty of fungus around for our decomposers. Because obviously dead things get broken down, and that energy gets put into the ground, or it gets put into scavenger animals like the radroaches, which then get eaten. So that brings the energy back into the system, and if it gets into the soil from the fungus, that helps the plants grow. And that brings it all full circle, because that's the way energy works. Energy can't be created or destroyed, it just gets passed through and moved on through different systems and changed into different forms as it goes through. That's where kind of physics comes into this whole thing as well. But it does show you that the environment does play a role in how all of this works. That we've got unique creatures here, these kind of amphibian ones that you just don't see elsewhere in the wasteland. And that kind of changes the types of smaller species that can survive here. It is having an impact on humans, and it's having an impact on the kind of insect life and things that can make its home here as well. Of course, one other living thing in inverted commas we have to talk about is the synths. So I put Nick Valentine. He's the best guy. So and again, they're a question mark. I've talked about this before with the synths. That I mean, obviously Nick Valentine's kind of a generation 2.5. He's a prototype that's in between Gen 2 and Gen 3. The Gen 3 being the synthetic humans that have synthetic organs and bones and flesh, but they are virtually indistinguishable from humans. But the question about them is, do they eat? Do they need to eat? I mean, I'm assuming that the organic synths can eat, but whether they need to or not, or whether they have a power source that's irrelevant to any kind of food intake or anything like that, because when you get them at your settlements, sometimes you'll get synth settlers that have been snuck in there, and you will notice that they don't sleep or anything like that. So, it's never really confirmed in the game that I can find anyway. And it does make me wonder, can they eat? Do they need to eat? Or can they eat because they want to eat, but they don't have to keep going? And also the question of whether synths can be eaten as well. Obviously, does that count as cannibalism? I don't know. But, they do fit into this weird kind of situation because they are organic, but are they edible? Should we be eating them? There's a whole big question mark. So synths exist, and we do know that they're on the island at Acadia. There's a sort of community of synths living there. Do they need food? Because obviously they do trade with the islanders at Far Harbour. They've had dealings with the Children of Atom, and they trade things. So what are they trading for? Do they need food, or are they just trading other things? It's not very clear. So synths are there, but I haven't really connected them to anything else because I don't know if they fit there, and I don't think they do. They don't really seem to need to eat to stay alive, but it's possible that their bodies have been made with the capability of eating, but it's maybe not something that's necessary for them. And presumably, I mean, I know you get the synthetic gorilla meat from the institute, but I don't. You could eat it, but I don't think you can cook it into anything. So yeah, big question mark over the synths there. And I don't know that we'll ever get definitive answers to that. I think it would have been nice actually if we had got into, even maybe you could only do this if you sided with the institute, but you could learn about how they make the Gen 3 synths specifically. What are they made of? How are they creating these human beings without doing it the old fashioned way? Like, what is it that they're using to generate these muscles and all that kind of thing? I think that would have been really interesting to explore, but we never really get to see. We get to see it happen, but we don't really get into any of the hows and the whys because we probably do know enough that potentially we could have the technology to do this. Now, I mean, I don't think we should. I think that could be a real problem. I mean, the way AI is so pervasive in the world right now is kind of concerning. Certainly, I have seen some very concerning things happen with the generative AI side of things, and it is something that I'm very much against for a number of reasons, particularly environmental concerns, and also the fact that we are potentially losing our humanity to these robots that, yeah, I dislike it. It's because they say, "Oh, yeah, you could just use AI to write your book." I mean, yes, I could, but it's not going to be very good. And as some of you guys probably know, I am an author. I haven't got anything published yet, but I'm working on my debut novel at the moment. And the thing about it is that I might not make a lot of money. I might not be able to make a living off my books, but it's not really why I'm doing it. I'm doing it because I enjoy writing. Um, and that's kind of my point, is that I want to do the writing. I don't want to just type in a few prompts and let some machine do the work. The fun part for me is the writing, is the creativity, and I think we are really in danger of losing that. and losing sort of critical thinking skills and research skills. If you're just going to ask ChatGPT about everything, and not verify any of what it says, because it can and is wrong. And I have seen it even just in the Google search AI things sometimes, that it will just give you information that is flat out wrong. And when you check the source that it cites, you can see that it's not telling you that, like, what the source says is totally different from what the AI is telling you and things. And I think it's something we do need to be very wary of. Just because technology is new, doesn't always mean that it's the best thing. And I think we are in danger of losing what makes us human. And I guess that's the point of most of this. But with the synths, it's a big question mark, and I would be interested to know more about how they work and how they actually make them and everything. But they didn't really kind of keep much of that in the game, or add much of that to the game, unfortunately, which is a bit sad. But anyway, ran over. That is the food chain for Far Harbour and the island. And I say it's quite a bit different from what we see in the Commonwealth. And again, with the DLCs, as I've said before, that's something that I think is a really positive thing. Because if you're going to take the player to a different location that's separate from the base game, things should be different. There should be some creatures that are unique. There should be some new environmental changes. It should be different because it makes it interesting. And I think that is one thing with Far Harbour that they really have nailed. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that. Hopefully interesting and informative for you. As always, I do love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Um, you know, questions, any kind of anything, any funny anecdotes that you've had. I mean, the chickens, one good thing about the chickens in this one is that at least if you shoot one, you're not going to get attacked by an entire town, unlike in Skyrim. Um, I think that's happened to a lot of people, myself included, where you've been fighting off a dragon that's attacking the town and you accidentally kill a chicken and then everybody hates you. Doesn't happen in Fallout, at least, so you're free to kill all the chickens and rabbits that you like in this game, which is nice. So yeah, let me know what you think, and I'll catch you guys next time. Bye.